right. So I just want to say good evening to all the beautiful people that made time for us today. Thank you so much for that. I am Jennifer Pryor. I am the Director of Organizing with Ohioans to Stop Executions, and we're leading the No Death Penalty Ohio campaign to end Ohio's death penalty once and for all. We have partnered with Faith Leaders of Color Coalition and Ohio Council of Churches to bring you tonight's program, Thou Shalt Not Kill. It's a very clear statement. I don't think we need to debate it, but for some reason we are. And first, I would greatly appreciate if each one of you took this moment to close your eyes. I know how that sounds. We're on Zoom, probably don't feel like you have to, but take a moment with me and close your eyes and take a deep breath. As you take that deep breath in, please think about why you're here tonight, why the death penalty matters to you, and why you deserve to live in a society that is free from state-sanctioned violence. And I said that way for a reason. Why do you deserve to live in a society free of state-sanctioned violence? This impacts you directly. I know you guys are eager to get the program started. This is a faith-based program, so let us begin with a prayer from Reverend Dr. Amariah McIntosh of Ohio Council of Churches. Would you please lead the way for us? Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to everyone who has joined us this evening. Let us pray. God of our weary years and the God of our silent tears, who has brought us thus far on this way. We come this evening to have a conversation. We come to hear, to learn, to be inspired, to be transformed. We know, God, that you love all of your children, no matter what we've done. As people of faith, we believe in grace, we believe in mercy, we believe in restoration and forgiveness. Help us as we advocate in our communities and in our states to look for a different answer, to look for a more peaceful resolution that honors both victim and perpetrator and brings us all to being the beloved community that you have always envisioned for us. This we pray and give thanks in your name. Amen and amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reverend Pastor Amariah. Good evening, everyone, and thank you again for joining us for this conversation, Thou Shalt Not Kill, and why the ending of state and federal sanctioned death must happen. I am Joia, Erin, Thornton, National Policy Strategist at the Southern Center for Human Rights in Atlanta, Georgia. I am also the Coalition Director for the Faith Leaders of Color Coalition, or FLOCC, and this is a group of Black and Indigenous clergy and faith influencers who are working to end the death penalty on a state and federal level. A couple of stats related to capital punishment to date. 2022 could be deemed the year of botched executions from the lethal injection method. 2022, according to the Death Penalty Information Center, 7 out of the 20 executions attempted in the US were visibly problematic. Executions were put on hold in Alabama, Tennessee, Idaho, and South Carolina when these states were unable to follow execution protocols. However, this information does open the door to answer the question of our opposers. There is no humane way to kill anyone. Tonight, we have teamed up with the Ohio Council of Churches, Ohioans to Stop Executions, to bring in Sister Helen Prejean, who has been a relentless and fearless leader in the anti-death penalty space, both nationally and internationally for a number of years. We hope this conversation will bring insight and foresight, awakenings, questions, and most importantly, action. I began my work in the death penalty abolition space about 5 years ago in Memphis, Tennessee. Is Memphis in the house? Drop it in the chat. Where I was an organizer for Tennesseans for Alternatives to the Death Penalty and program manager for Just City. I understood that inviting the interfaith community to this conversation of the death penalty was critical and powerful. Faith leaders are extremely valuable in shaping policy, mobilizing public figures, and creating a collective consciousness on various social issues. But then again, we know this. Those of us on this call and those who are still coming in are activists and advocates, lawyers, professors, pastors, deacons, students, and others who have all recognized how important the voice and posture of faith has been in the world. Faith has always been at the intersection of justice. Among those faith leaders who boldly take poise and position is our speaker for tonight, Sister Helen Prejean. She is a prominent American Roman Catholic nun and activist known for her work as a death penalty abolitionist. Her 1993 book, which many of us have read, Dead Man Walking, details her experiences as spiritual advisor to death row inmates and has made her a leading voice in the campaign to end capital punishment in the United States and around the world. So for a few minutes, let's listen to Sister Helen's vision and thoughts on faith and the death penalty. Sister Helen, we are ready to listen.
I am so glad to be here. Do you know the role that people of color, faith leaders played in Virginia? Do you know that they were bumping along in Virginia, moving it away from the death penalty, but they weren't there? And then somebody, a friend of mine, I know, called and just said, what do you need? What is the catalyst in the movement you need in Virginia? They said, we need people of color, faith leaders. And this person played a part, threw some money in there. The money was not, of course, the thing, but it was that group of the people of color, faith leaders that made the difference in Virginia. They started standing up. They pushed the legislation. They were the catalyst that made the difference. Because God, this thing is so riddled with race. It's a continuation of the legacy of slavery. Governments killing people, strapping them down and killing them. As if that's not the torture of a human being to be placed in a cell 15 years, 20, and then to be taken out and to be killed. How can we not see it? There's this great saying from Latin America, what the eye does not see, the heart cannot feel. Well, the thing about faith is it gives us eyes to see. And that great song, Imagine Me, do you know that Pope Francis talks about the theology of what if? The theology of imagination? The Saint Ignatius of Loyola that founded the Jesuits, he made a retreat in which in his imagination, he began to picture, well, what if I was like St. Francis? What if I was like St. Dominic? What if I was like, and it happens in imagination. And imagination, we get set on fire. We begin to picture another reality. The day, when justice is going to stream down in a fiery, Amos, the whole thing of the gushing of justice and coming, it happens first in imagination. So I am really glad to be with you because I believe you are God's own catalyst that's going to help Ohio do it. Help Ohio finally get it done. And as Amnesty points out, the first thing you do to end the death penalty is you stop practicing it. Prosecutors stop giving it. Juries stop voting for it. You shut it down. That's the way God works. You know, Teilhard de Chardin, the famous, wonderful paleontologist who did so much with evolution and the work of God in the world, he said, believe above all in the slow work of God. We work slowly and we work steadily, and it is our commitment. It is our steady commitment. Mother Teresa said that a long time ago. You don't have to be successful, but you got to be faithful. And as long as we are faithful, and that's faith, meeting up against it, that God does the rest. So let me tell you a little bit about my story. I had to wake up. I had to wake up to justice. God's been very patient with me to wake me up. I'm a white person, lived in the suburbs, got white privilege. I mean, lived in New Orleans, was disconnected from my brothers and sisters in the inner city, half of whom live in poverty, half of whom had the police beating them up, half of whom were going to Angola, to our prison. And it's not that I was a bad person. And this is what gives me patience and love as I go out to bring people into the journey about the death penalty. American people are not bad people. It's just that they're unawake because they're unexposed. I mean, do you know how good it is to be awake? Do you know what a grace it is to be awake? As hard as it is, as overwhelmed as we get, but we're awake. To be awake is to be in grace. And the great thing of faith is that it puts us in community. We're not in faith alone. We're not out on some mountaintop being awake. We're with people, with other people whose faith enkindles us. And when our faith goes weak and we don't feel we have energy and that we can, what made me think I was going to do this? And we gather in the community of faith and we blow on the coals of our soul. And then the flame begins to flicker again because we're in a community of faith, which is what we are here. Doesn't matter if we separated on these machines. That doesn't matter. If we're within sound of our voices, which is our interior, our soul, our inner life, our voices, and we can hear each other, then we are in the circle of faith and we can be moved and we can be open. So how did I wake up? And it was faith in every single step in the waking up. So I was always, I was a good nun. I was prayerful. I wasn't beating kids with the rulers, and I love the kids I taught. I love the prayer groups I had in my parish church and adult formation in religion. But I was disconnected. And then that moment, and I have it in a book called River of Fire, where I talk about waking up to the gospel of justice. Waking up, especially through the words which I heard at a talk, Jesus preached good news to the poor. Well, of course, in my world of white privilege, having medical care, having everything I need to eat, not worrying about rent, the whole bit, I pictured, well, good news to the poor that Jesus preached was one day they're going to have a great place in heaven. Well, what about your children dying before they're 5 in Latin America because you can't get medical care? What about people dying here because they can't get medical care? What about poverty and what it does to you here? What about that? But I wasn't awake to it. I heard a talk, and you never know when God's going to get you. Nuns go to a lot of conferences, go to a lot of talks. This nun spoke to us. And she said the words, and Jesus preached good news to the poor. And I thought I knew what she was going to say next, about how every hair of your head is numbered. And one day you will sit at the banquet of God and all your sorrows will be turned to joy. You will have a great place in the kingdom in the next life. But she said, how could Jesus preach good news to poor people without integral to that good news being that it is not God's will for you to be poor, and you have a right to reach for what is rightfully yours. Poverty is not God's will, it's human systems. And for the first time I got it. Oh my God, yes, of course. That's not what the good news is, the good news. And I went, I'm out in the suburb. I don't even know any poor people, and I live in New Orleans, where half the city There's African-American people struggling against poverty, and I don't know any of them. And there's the action. There's just a step at a time. I moved out of the suburbs. I moved into the St. Thomas housing projects, worked at a place called Hope House. First time in my life, I lived among African-American people as my peers. I sat at their feet and I heard their stories, and they changed my heart and they taught me. It's the first time I even heard the term white privilege. Because when you got white privilege, you don't know you got it. You just figure, well, I'll never have a house detective following me when I go to shop in the store. I never have anybody saying to me, well, you're a credit to your race. I don't even know what racism is. And racism is different from prejudice. And I learned this. I learned this at the feet of people who were my teachers at Hope House. I'm thinking of Barbara Major, Ron Chisholm, and these people. And prejudice is individuals. I can be prejudiced against you, you can be prejudiced against me, but racism is prejudice hooked into institutional systems. It's systematic. So boy, do we see it in the criminal justice system. I mean, I had everything to learn, but boy, do I know it. Do I know how it works with the death penalty? Just look at it. Overwhelmingly, 75% every single time the death penalty is sought, which is supposed to be for the worst of the worst, it's because white people got killed. The starting point is almost, who'd you kill? Does that victim have status in this society? Do we care about them? Are we outraged over their death? Will we seek the ultimate penalty for their death? Or is it like a blip on the screen? When I lived in St. Thomas, I saw the huge difference. I mean, Virginia Carr had 2 sons killed within 6 months, 2 sons. And they didn't even investigate the murders of her kids. They were Black. I began to see it. See, you got to see it to feel it. I just read this psalm. Your arrows have pierced deep within me. It's this, you're struck, you hit, you set on fire. Look at all the images, the burning bush. All these images of coming alive and being struck and moved and changed so that then you begin to act. That's faith alive in us. And so then for me, going to St. Thomas, I'm among my African-American brothers and sisters who are teaching me. I get an invitation to write a man on death row. I write to him thinking I'm only writing letters. I end up being with him when he is executed, and I am saying to him as he's being strapped into that wooden chair to be electrocuted to death, look at my face. I will be the face of Christ. And it comes so clear, thou shalt not kill. And that has been my dialogue with the Catholic Church, because in the teachings, traditional teaching of most Christian churches isn't just Catholics, upholding the right of the state to take life. Well, you got a long history there. When you didn't have prisons and you had volatile, violent people in society. But the teaching was always to protect society, to protect innocent people from violent people, because you didn't have a way to contain them. You didn't have prisons. So the death penalty was upheld. For 1,500 years, it was upheld in the Catholic Church. But dialogue happens just like us in Ohio. The dialogue. Look at the death penalty. Look at the teachings of Christ. Look how it's working in Ohio. Look how prejudiced it is. Look how racist it is. Look how it's only for the poor. And we wake each other up. And the people of Ohio are going to wake up just like everybody else wakes up, like Virginia woke up, like the other states that have abolished the death penalty woke up, like they're waking up in Oklahoma right now. There are over 60 legislators in Oklahoma that have gotten involved with the death penalty because they see how broken the thing is. And there may be this man, Richard Glossop, who's innocent, and they've gotten involved in a case. It only takes one case sometimes. You've had over 11 people in Ohio wrongfully put on death row. You're making a lot of mistakes. And people are good-hearted. Once you can get them past this fear that's put in there, oh, we got to kill these people. We can't put them in prison. They're evil. They're going to kill other inmates. They're going to kill guards. It's people are natural born killers. That's not who people are. If you've ever visited a prison, you know, people can make mistakes. We make mistakes, but we are all more than the worst thing we ever do in our life. That is the message of Jesus, pure and simple, that we can always change. We can always be redeemed. And so here I am, I got involved, I write this man. I never dreamed I was going to be there in the execution chamber when he was killed. And that was the lightning for me. That was the fire for me, coming out of that execution chamber right after midnight, April 5th, 1984. You know, the first thing I did when I got out of the prison gates, I threw up. I had never in my life seen a human being who was alive, who was praying, who was changing, who was remorseful, and killed anyone. And that's what brings me to you. That's why I've done this work. How could I turn my back on this and say, well, I'm going to go get another degree at graduate school? I'm not doing this anymore. This is too painful. As if, how could I turn my back on the grace of being a witness? Because once we're a witness, the call's there. I got to tell a story. And that's why I wrote Dead Man Walking. And that's why I get out there and I give talks. So I'm glad to be talking to you, because you know what the definition of justice is? The best definition of justice? It's just us. But we have God inside of us. And we have each other. And we are relentless. We're going to take the steps leading from this to keep bringing it to the people and to find as many creative ways as we can. Use the book, Dead Man Walking. It helps people, because I'll bring you over to both sides. I'm sorry. I said this thing so I didn't go over, okay? You got to bring people in the journey over to both sides to go into the suffering of the victims. Okay. Now, what is going to help heal them? You really think? People waiting, then the average wait is 17 years, and they're going to sit on a front row finally after 17 years and watch as the state kills the one who kills their loved one, and they watch that violence and it's supposed to heal them. That's not what the faith is about. That is not what Jesus is about. That is not what we are about. And that fire that it burns within us comes straight from God's Spirit. And it's the Spirit in us coming together. That's why I'm really happy. It's a privilege for me to have just a short time to talk to you. And you're gathering together to do the work for Ohio to become a life saint. So thank you for letting me be a part of this. Good luck and all the best with the rest of the conference. May you catch on fire. May you leave very different from when you came in. And God bless the community, the beloved community that Martin Luther King always talked about. So thank you.
No, thank you, Sister Helen, my fellow Louisiana sister. You brought up a couple of points. You brought up a couple of points that I must underline from your conversation with us. The first is the death penalty is riddled with race, and that's undeniable. And I really ask and urge all of you to dig deep and go to the Death Penalty Information Center and other places of data that talk about that. The first thing you need to do to end the death penalty is to stop doing it. That's important. You talked about the slow work of God and to have faith, and God does the rest. Poverty is not God's will, it is human systems. And then justice means just us. And again, thank you for calling out Oklahoma. There's some work going on there. I believe Ohio has some work to do as well. It was great synergy for the past 2 years. And also applauding Virginia. Virginia was the first former Confederate state to abolish the death penalty, and we can do it again with another Southern state. It should almost be like a race, like who's going to be the next Southern state to abolish the death penalty. We're going to hear from Bishop Palmer, and he's going to offer a call to action for faith communities in Ohio and around the nation. So hang out, Sister Helen, a little bit longer. We have a couple of questions, but I do want to acknowledge Bishop Gregory Palmer. He serves as the Episcopal leader of the Ohio West area of the United Methodist Church. He was assigned there on September 1st, 2012. Bishop Palmer was born and reared in Philadelphia. Bishop Palmer is a child of the church, like myself, the son of Reverend Herbert E. and Miss Charlotte Hewitt Palmer. Bishop Palmer's father was a retired United Methodist pastor, and his mother was a school teacher in the Philadelphia public school system. Bishop Palmer received his undergraduate degree from George Washington University in DC and Master of Divinity degree from Duke University Divinity. So Bishop Palmer, lead us in the call of action. Again, we're going to allow a couple of questions, but we are ready to hear from you.
Thank you very much. And Sister Helen, you have, I don't have much hair, but what I have left, you have set on fire tonight with the gospel, the good news about what God is doing and what God can do. And Sister Joia, thank you for that fabulous summary of some of the remarks that Sister Helen shared with us. Dear friends, this is about not just having our hair set on fire, and it's not just about a night of inspiration for those of us who are committed and already committed to justice, but it is a call. It is a call to action, particularly to undo and to dismantle the injustice that the death penalty anywhere represents. Remember the language of both of our speakers so far, and that is, this is about ending state-sanctioned violence and murder of other human beings, no matter what it is that they have done. And many of us, if not all of us in our faith traditions, have some teaching and some conviction that leads us in the opposite direction of the death penalty. So the first thing I want to encourage you to do as a person of faith is to take a deep dive, not only in the scriptures, thou shalt not kill. By the way, that was in the list of the 10 commandments, and they were not the 10 suggestions, may I say to you. That's a little cliche-ish. That does not mean that it is not true. They are not the 10 suggestions of how you might live if you get around to it. They are the 10 commandments, which means pay attention to them, do them, act on them, and killing other human beings at the hand of the state or through personal violence or through systemic actions of institutions is not what any of us are called to do or who we are called to be as religious institutions, as Christian communities, faith-based institutions, or as a society that says we are founded upon the principles upon which we are founded. So this is about our having our hearts set on fire and invigorated to be those who act. Sister Prejean says that when you are awakened, when you see something, you feel something. When you feel something, you can see something. So that when that awakening takes place, we are urged not to just say a light bulb has gone off inside of us and, oh, gee, wouldn't it be nice if we did better or did differently? You, and especially you, are being called to act. There are a couple of ways, and some of these I think will be dropped into the chat. Number one, be in touch with your state lawmakers. And there will be a link in there that suggests to you how you can do that, urging them to end the death penalty in Ohio. Secondly, you can be in touch with the governor of this state to keep any stay that there is on the death penalty going at this time. Remember what Sister Helen said, you practice it before even the law changes. So we need to encourage our governor to practice not having and implementing the death penalty in Ohio until we can get the law changed and he signs a no more death penalty in Ohio in what we hope is a near long-term future. We're asking all clergy, but particularly clergy of color, to get on board with signing a letter that encourages there to be the commutation of the federal death row. And that link is in the chat as well. But keep in mind, these are actions: writing, calling your legislature, and delving into your faith community. Don't assume that just because sort of people around you think a little bit like you, that means they're committed to action. So when you act, you ought to be inviting others. I encourage you to invite others to act with you, to the end of reaching out to legislators, reaching out to your religious communities, and mobilizing more and more people to end the scourge of the death penalty in our time. It is within our grasp. Sister Prejean, Sister Joia have reminded us that Ohio is near. We're on the brink, but it will take all of us to bring it across the finish line. Finally, this, Sister Helen said, among other things, do not discount the influence that you have. Have we not seen enough recent elections in which literally every vote mattered, every call matters, every letter matters, every physical demonstration matters? Please do not discount yourself. Someone is sitting on death row, awaiting, hoping that that scourge and that yoke will be lifted up off of them. And it's up to you and it's up to me, but let's do it together. Back to you, Sister Joia.
Thank you so much, Bishop Palmer. I am so full off of this conversation, and I've been kind of paying attention to the chat, and I see others are full and inspired. And I encourage you to connect in the chat. I see a lot of states represented, so definitely make sure that you are connecting with each other through the chat. I'm going to pass it to my sister, Jennifer, to handle a few of the questions. I believe that she's answered a few, but we do have about two, Sister Helen, that we have questions for. So Jennifer.
Yes. First of all, I was sitting here snapping and clapping and having a ball when I was listening to you, Sister Prejean. So thank you for that. One of the questions that came up was, who did you find the most supporting your mission, and who are your greatest advocates? I think it's an interesting question because I'm an organizer. So I was really curious to hear what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, sure. I found people, first of all, who were awakened to poverty, to justice. Okay. And in the beginning, it's mostly members of Amnesty International. We had to form the Louisiana Coalition to abolish the death penalty. And in the beginning, for me, it wasn't many churches. I couldn't find a priest at Mass that would talk about the death penalty. I even had the bishop, the Archbishop of New Orleans, who was for the death penalty. The U.S. bishops weren't doing anything. So I just kept going to the people. It's always about going to the people. And so we started having marches. We started doing things. We did a march from New Orleans to Baton Rouge, because that's the only way you can get attention of the media. If the Louisiana Coalition Abolish the Death Penalty, if we tried to have a press conference, nobody would come. Who are we? But if you do action, and especially sacrificial action of some, then the media comes out, what are y'all marching for? And then you learn how to deal with the media. You learn how you don't make a big, long speech. You're going to have 15 seconds on the evening news. And you begin to meet people, a lot of young people. We reached out to young people. And that was very important. And learning, see, I had a lot to learn. I was really digging into understanding about the death penalty. I mean, I learned a lot when I wrote the book, because I knew nothing. When, we did the movie, Tim Robbins and Susan Sarandon did this movie, A Dead Man Walking. All while Tim Robbins was doing the movie, he kept saying, well, the nun was in over her head. She didn't know anything, and I didn't. I learned from the lawyers who were in there. and I learned from the death row inmate himself. I would encourage everybody personally to get involved with somebody who's going through the suffering, to write letters to them, to become a pen pal, to get into prisons, to get that direct contact as much as you can with people. Those are all things we began to do. And my greatest advocates then were the lawyers who were in there, members of human rights communities that got it about the death penalty, and we were learning together in the beginning, and not too many from the religious community, but my sisters, the Sisters of St. Joseph, soon joined in and gave me over to the work. So I worked for free in the movement and didn't have to get a salary, and that really helped too.
Thank you for that answer. There's another good question that came through. It kind of piggybacked on something that I was thinking about, but it's you mentioned healing that needs to take place for families of victims. How do we encourage the media to move past the narrative that the death penalty is applied fairly on behalf of victims? And can you point to any reports about how the death penalty is applied in cases of white murder victims and not so much in the cases of victims of color? I think that's a big question. I'm putting you on the spot, but you've
No,
been
you're
at this
not.
a while. You've been
No,
at
you're
this
not.
a while.
No, you're not. The first thing you do is you don't go try to persuade the media. We got to go to the victims' families themselves, and what do they need? We started a group. I did one thing. We started Survive. They need the help. What's being done for them, and what does the state of Ohio actually do for them? They're in trauma. They're in grief. They lose their jobs. They get divorces. Their children. The family breaks apart. Where is the healing help for them? So we have to know that. We got to know that from the ground first up. So we have to be educated in that. We have to go to victims' families. What exists for them? And then we encourage them to get their voices out there. And we're the support. We're not their voices, but we help them get their voices out of what these families really need. Then finally, when things happen, the media is always going to follow, but they're never the ones to lead, and so I wouldn't go to the media first at all. The media's got to figure it out, but we act, we get, to me, the image of the cross with both arms outstretched, Jesus outstretched, victims are on one arm of that cross, compassionate love and action for murder victims' families, and on the other, the perpetrators. Both arms of the cross we embrace. And so for murder victims' families, a whole lot needs to be done. First of all, just to get the knowledge, what does Ohio actually do for murder victims' families? And even to get that information to victims' families. I remember one family went to the sheriff's office, like, I need some help for my family. I hear there's this victims help group. And the person said, I don't know nothing about no help for victims' families. Write to Ann Lander. She helps people. People don't even get information about what the state actually can give them for counseling, So, get in there with the victims' families.
I have another question, which is actually a compliment. Of course, you get a lot of compliments, Sister Prejean, but your book changed my views on the death penalty. Thank you. What are some specific steps that we might take to end the death penalty? And I will say in Ohio, I can answer some of those questions, but I'd love to hear from you, Sister Prejean. What have you seen universally that has been effective that people can do?
Well, first of all, people, and Thurgood Marshall said this. He said, the American people say they support the death penalty. He said, but the death penalty they support is not the one we have. They're not educated. You got to educate the people. Now we got to be creative in the way we can do that. Like you might gather a whole group of people in your house, 12 people, 10 people. Show the film at that man walking. That's an honest film, and it's going to break it open because it goes into the victims' families. And first of all, people really have to surface how they actually feel. It's great to be religious and all that. You know, you're supposed to be following Jesus, but the movie can really open it up for the discussion. And then at the second part of that with the group is, did you know this? And teach them, here's information about Ohio. Did you know this about Ohio and this and this? And here's how you can get involved. It's many little groups like that with people we can do. The other thing is, I mean, I really believe in the book because the book I know takes people there. And when people are reading, they're meditating. They're not debating. They're going to a place and really using, you know, their imagination. So it's hooking up with people that you're not by yourself. And it's education, education, education.
Okay,
That's-
and I'm gonna pause there. I want to pass it to Joia. Reverend Jack Sullivan, though, is here. He's with the Ohio Council of Churches, who also helped bring this forth. I don't want to put him on the spot, but he has been given the platform, and so I want to pass it to Joia to make this happen. But I will say that Reverend Jack Sullivan is a co-victim. That is a term that we use here in Ohio when it comes to people who are survivable, who have survived someone who has been murdered. And so he is an ally and he is a faith leader. And Joia, I will actually pass it to you before we do anything else.
So much wisdom has been shared tonight on this panel. I'm going to go ahead and defer to Reverend Dr. Jack Sullivan if he has 3 to 5 minutes to share with us. And then Bishop Palmer, please close us out. This event has been worthwhile. It's been recorded. Please go and rewatch it. Ohio, we can do this. We can do this. Nationally, we can do this. The Deep South, where I focus my work, we can do this. So Reverend Dr. Jack, give us about 3 to 5 minutes, and then we'll pass it over to Bishop Palmer to close us out.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. I'm honored to have a spot here tonight to greet all of you on behalf of the Ohio Council of Churches and my faithful colleague, Dr. McIntosh, who will present in just a moment or two. But it is true, I am a co-victim. My baby sister, Jennifer, was murdered in our home city of Cleveland, Ohio, some 26 years ago. And at the time of her murder, I sent a letter to the Ohio Victims Assistance Program asking for support for our family. I received a nice form letter saying we heard from you and we'll get back to you shortly. 27 years later, I have yet to hear from the Ohio Victims Assistance Program, while by my estimate, about 16 and the matrix of execution, state-sponsored death, homicide here in Ohio. Just think what that 16 million could have done for co-victims in Ohio, folks who needed assistance with mortgages or rent or baby formula or diapers or therapy sessions, tuition payments, food, electric bills, and so on and so forth. The money is misspent when it's invested in death. And the state surrenders its high ground when it invests in death and chooses to do so over and again, supporting those who need restoration. Executions will never give us wholeness, never provide closure. All they do is continue the state-sponsored, continue the cycle of death, that has claimed so many of our loved ones. And so more and more co-victims like myself are rising up, sometimes with knobby knees and trembling voices, saying to the state, don't kill in our names. Instead, invest in our families, defund the death penalty, and put those revenues into co-victim families. So thank you for giving me a moment tonight. I'm glad to be able to greet all of you. God bless all of you tonight.
Dr. Sullivan, thank you for that personal witness. Every time I hear it from you, I get chills. And because you have pointed us in the direction of precisely what Sister Helen has shared with us, that this is all about relationships, and it is all about seeing the needs. And you've invited us, as Sister Helen has invited us, to see the needs of those who are victims of violence and crime, and to see those who are the perpetrators, and to see that in the redemption of all of those comes the beginning of the healing of our communities. And a punitive system that is driven by punishment as the only solution is not ultimately redemptive for those who've been victimized by crime, violent, mean-spirited crimes, and those themselves who have been caught a case and are caught up in the justice system. So thank you for reminding us, both of you, that this is all about relationships. I want to remind all of us tonight about reaching out to our legislators, also writing the president about what he can do in terms of the federal death row and the commutations there, but also to remind you that the call to action is for all of us to hear the clarion call and to feel in our hearts and to see the people whose lives have been thrown into chaos because of violent crime, and that includes the victims and the perpetrators. And Sister Helen, most eloquently, in telling her own story of awakening, dare I say, Sister Prejean, your own conversion, so to speak, not to knowing God, not to knowing Jesus Christ, but to going deeper into the life that was already shaping you, where you testified to the complete relocation of where you were living, casting your lot with the poor, those who were caught up in systemic oppression, racism, and the systems, and you built relationships. You went in to Angola and you built relationships, and you stuck with it even when it was so deeply nauseating after you had witnessed that execution, that all that was in you had to come up. So thank you for reminding us that the call to action is not only about building our coalitions, not only about influencing public policy, yes, yes, and yes, but it is ultimately about relationships. And every one of us, no matter where we find ourselves, can connect with someone who is incarcerated, and in this case, focus on someone on death row. Sister Helen has told us about opening up an opportunity for correspondence, and every one of us can relate to someone in the community who has been a victim of crime, and the perpetrator is on death row. So friends, do not miss this opportunity. There is a spiritual in the tradition of African American people that goes on this wise. I'm not going to sing, I'm just going to offer the words. And it says, "Sinner, please don't let this harvest pass." Let me say it again. Sinner, please don't let this harvest pass. And it was a song that had multi-layered meaning among slave foreparents for some of us. And in part, it was a call to move from slavery into freedom, saying the train is coming through tonight. Don't let this harvest pass. Do you see the metaphor? Do you see the poetic language that even among slave folks, they were communicating in ways where they were plotting their own liberation? And now Sister Helen has invited us, in light of the gospel, in light of our faith commitments, in light of our claimed civility, to plot the liberation of all of us from the scourge of the death penalty. It is my hope and my prayer that God will help us to be and become the society and to become the people of faith that we believe we have been called to be. You have the power. Take action now. Sister Joia, before I invite us to a closing blessing, any further word from you? And I extend the same invitation to Sister Jennifer.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone. Sister Helen, I know she doesn't remember, about a year ago, we talked about needing Black clergy, the Black faith community to be more vigilant. When I was on a call with Louisiana, when we were trying to attempt to pass a couple of bills last year, but we need Black and Indigenous folks to join us in this fight, to not give up the good fight, because in due season, we shall reap if we faint not. So I'm going to pass it over to Bishop Palmer to close us out. Thank you, Sister Helen. Love
Thank
you
you.
as
Real
always.
quick, I'm gonna jump in. I'm sorry. I'm that girl. I'm the girl that jumps in. I'm so sorry.
All
We are
right,
going to
jump.
be spending- you know who I am. We're going to be sending you guys an update. I know a lot of people there were a lot of links, there were a lot of emails, there was a lot of content, and we did also record this event. We will make sure that you guys get that in an update. Thank you for being present. Don't leave, wait for your blessing. We're going to pray this out, and we're going to have a great day tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Bishop Palmer.
Dear friends, would you receive this blessing? These are words from the Apostle Paul, very near to the end to his letter to the church at Rome, where he says, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that you may abound in hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. Dear friends, may that hope, that peace, that overflow spur us into new and faithful actions for a just society. Amen.